little then, don't be alarmed, and please remain in your seats. The doors have just been locked for your own safety. In the meantime, allow yourselves to be entertained. Tonight's story is the Voodoo Doll.
The Voodoo Doll, The Priestess and the Pleasure by Andrew Reeves, written in association with and inspired by the song Voodoo Doll by Off the Realm, published by Alpha Stigmata Records. Illuminated by the brilliance of the fire, the figures sway. Dry wood cracks and hisses in the savagery of the flames. The light rain, the only stranger in the cove, spattering their contortions as they glisten and dance, mirroring the shadows on the beach. A single wave slams against the rocks, the tortured foam sucked back into the deep like a doomed soul fleeing the devil, retreating forever into the fathomless black, unseen. On the moonlit sand the figures writhe, limbs, bodies convulsing, twisting in a motion that will last until the dawn. They dance for pleasure, I am sure, but not their own. Night upon night they gather beneath the moon, around the fire, by the shoreline. The lonely finger of land that forms the bay in which they meet creates a world where they alone exist. They and I, their hidden observer. I am the only one who knows they come. The night is young, I know what awaits, as I watch them cavort and twist in the dimness of the glow, their robes discarded by the waves that lap ashore. No one can blame me for attending, watching as they perform their ritual beneath the stars. Their minds, unlike the starlight, are not present. I can see that, as though they shed their consciousness as easily as their attire, and amid their dance, a beating, soothing rhythm, I know they are detached, mindless, an unexplained trance. I am under their spell, as they are under the command of the dancing fire, enchanted by it, fueled by its oxygen hunger as their slender bodies sway. No music save the lapping of the deep, no light show save the dirty clouds that scud the waning moon, no audience save my eyes, transfixed. I wonder what brings them here, I wonder why they gather in the bay unknown. They never greet each other, they arrive, disrobe, dance beneath the sky, and when their movements calm, they gather their robes and file away in silence as the dawn's sun rises from its watery bed, before it must fall again behind the crag across the cove, and then they return to perform once more, and I with them, bearing witness in the dark. And then one night I see her amongst the rocks, an ancient totem clasped in her fist, plucking thorns from the bushes where she waits, piercing the totem as she watches the dancers dance. She holds a doll, old and hewn from sackcloth. I realise the movements of the harem by the fire are controlled not by the fire, but by the contortions of the doll, as the hidden woman twists it and its limbs, mimicking the dancers on the beach. No, controlling the movements of the girls. They are unaware, mindless and sightless on the sand, little more than puppets as they reenact the movements of the doll. It is not fire that commands their graceful action. It is the doll. It is the woman, dressed in priestess robes, conducting their ritual from her vigil on the rocks. This changes everything. Am I a part of the ritual too? I bear witness every night, in my own way an extension of the ritual, as the priestess choreographs their mesmerizing display. The distant fire catches in her eyes, lighting her pupils for an instant like airborne sparks against the crag. I start to worry, she may be noticed, the whole scene may fall apart, but the silent priestess remains unseen, night after night as I come to watch her direct their motion on the beach. I have to know more about her and the power she holds. I have to understand the doll. I begin to sit closer to her every time I come, until I am right behind her in the rocks. She doesn't know I'm there, as I watch her girls performing on the beach for all to see. But there's only her, and I. Soon I am no longer transfixed by the girls, but by the priestess who decides their every move, twisting the doll like voodoo in her long and slender fingers. She is beautiful. I haven't seen her face, but I'll never forget it, burnt into my mind like an echo of forethought, like a dream before the sleep. I work my way closer to her, and soon I realise I could stand over her and she would never notice me in the dark. She is as mindless as the girls, in the grip of a catatonia whilst her fingers work the thorns into the doll. The doll has her in its spell, that much is clear. It wills her to pluck the thorns. She chooses them blindly, her fingers know which ones are right. I draw so close I can see her sharp gasps crystallise in the crispness of the air. I hear her breath as she chants unintelligible incantations to the rhythm of the dancers on the sand. I am mesmerised by her. Each night I come and stand over her, close enough to touch her, each of us a puppet of the doll. I watching, the priestess with the thorns, the girls in all their splendour on the beach, and the doll, crooked and old as the moon. None of us can escape the nightly gathering in the bay. I want to tell, but the very thought of revealing the doll's ritual brings fears of danger to my mind. I cannot tell. The doll feels my soul, feels my intentions. I cannot tell. One night I work my way around and in front of the priestess until I am sitting right before her. She looks through me to the dancers on the beach. I stare into her eyes, empty and haunted like the night. Her face, it is just as I imagined it, as though I knew her before this moment. I've never seen such beauty, or such slavery. She is an extension of the doll, intertwined with its intent so closely that it's impossible for me to truly know whether it is controlling her, or she is controlling it. She is an enigma, and one I cannot possibly abandon. The hours pass slowly as I stare at her, and as the sun begins to peak above the sea, I realise I have been locked in position unaware of the cold night air, or the mosquitoes that curiously drift above our heads. I try to move, but my limbs are frozen, as her fingers are frozen around the doll. We have been captivated all night long. I spend the next day away from the beach, telling myself I won't go back, that I must resist the spell the doll holds over me. But it's no use. By nightfall I am picking my way down amongst the rocks to the little place where the priestess hides. She arrives after me, and I hunker down behind the bushes where the wild thorns grow. We watch together, but apart, as the night's entertainment turns up on the sand. They barely give each other nods, disrobe and begin to sway around the fire which already burns, the fire which I have never seen being built or reduced to ash and spent wood, almost like it is an eternal flame which rages at the beckoning of the doll. But tonight something is different. I feel the priestess energy, feel the doll's energy as they fight for control. I see for the first time the doll's fitful jerking is not the cause of the dancing girls. I feel its anger as it struggles against the strong hands of the priestess, and I realise I have been mistaken all along. It is the priestess who is controlling the doll, as she attempts to hold it still, to channel its ancient magic at the girls. She is in a trance all of her own, and the doll is angry, livid, fighting against her grip. I can feel the battle of their wills, and I know the awful truth. The priestess is abusing the power of the doll. It yearns to do harm, but the priestess has gained dominion of its power and converts it into pleasure instead of pain. The girls I know should be writhing in agony on the sand, but the doll's ancient wrath has been usurped and dampened, and instead is being used to choreograph their majestic sway. I feel the doll's blistering anger growing as night after night it is rendered powerless in the priestess' grip. And somehow, now I understand the truth. I understand too that the doll is satisfied I am ready. It is clear to me now that the doll has been bringing me here every night, calling to me in my subconscious. It has set me a mission I cannot refuse. I have to stop the priestess. I must release the doll, but this will harm the girls. I resist the urge to smash the priestess into so much nothing against the rocks, and somehow I succeed in holding back each night as I am summoned to the cove against my will. The anger in the ancient doll is escalating, until eventually it wrestles control of the hands that bind it, and sends a wave of agony screaming through the priestess, coursing through her body, along her fingers and across the beach in deadly bolts of raging fury at the girls. The energy waves blast aside the flames and send the dancers tumbling across the sand, several of them ending up in the shallow waves. The fire rages momentarily, brighter than before, and then is quashed. A deep black silence descends on the beach, and the night air stills. Even the lapping of the waves is muted. I lie in shock, hardly daring to breathe. Then the girl's screams reach me in a chilling wall of sound. Pained yells and cries as they begin a different writhing on the beach. I claw my way up a rock and watch as they spasm in agony where they lie, limbs assuming unnatural positions, flexing, straightening, ignoring the limitations of their sockets as arms and legs bend backwards far beyond where the bones allow. Then they are back on their feet. This time they dance the devil's dance, like string puppets without strings, about to fall in that moment between animation and sinking into death. But they don't fall. They march around the embers of the fire like wooden dolls, crying in agony as their limbs crack and break. They dance like demented parodies of themselves, unable to stop, unable to switch direction, and as the flames suddenly burst into existence again, I realise in horror the girls are marching in a spiral, closer with each revolution to the fire. I turn in desperation to the priestess. She watches like I do, but seems frozen in position. The doll is clenched tightly in her fist, so tight as to banish any spirit it might contain. For now, at least, the doll is still. I scream for her to do something or the girls will surely die, but she doesn't hear me. She begins to chant desperate words, and I turn to see the girls parading ever closer to the flames. They try to hold back but are unable to control themselves. One by one their spiral sends them to the hunger of the fire, each engulfed in a cloak of orange death that sends them dancing in a circle around the flames until the last of them has entered. And they continue to dance around the fire, in the fire, a part of the fire, their many screams echoing out across the cove, but no one comes. And suddenly, the priestess is running across the sand, heading out from the rocks towards the girls, the doll raised above her head in panic-stricken anguish as she draws close to the flames, repelled by its searing heat and the smell of the girls' bodies as they dance their dance of death in the depths of the blaze, hair alight, screaming as they try to escape but are unable. The priestess falls to her knees and watches helpless as they stumble and fall, crawling through the crackling pyre in torment, but returning to their feet, continuing their tortured parade, as the flames reduce them to a shadow of the glory they once represented. Screaming in hatred, the priestess tries to rip the head off the doll, but she is unable to, and instead she launches it straight into the fire. It hits the flames with a huge explosion, which engulfs the girls and throws the priestess onto her back. The resultant flash blinds me, and I shield my face as a fireball lights the night, rolling across the bay and out to sea, illuminating the heavens for a moment, before dissipating into nothing with a whoomph. A wave of heat strikes me and tosses me against the rocks, and I am sent into a deep and blank oblivion, haunted by a vision of the priestess set alight, running screaming into the sea. The sound of distant breakers comes ashore, waking me from a soulless void. I claw my way up the rock where I have fallen. It is streaked with blood, and I realise I have deeply gashed my temple. Dazed and confused, I set out onto the sand with bloodshot eyes. The sun has risen from behind the glittering horizon and is pushing up into the pale sky. The fire is dead, a curling beacon of smoke climbing lazily skyward from the burnt and blackened wood. There is no sign of the priestess or the girls. In shock, I stagger out across the beach, looking desperately for the priestess. I see her, lying face down at the water's edge, and urgently I run to her. It is obvious from a distance she is dead, her charred face part submerged in the salty tide, her long hair undulating on the surf. I backstep away from her and turn towards the fire, where the blackened remains of the dancing girls lie lifeless in the wood, horrific and frozen in tortured throes. I search the fire site for the doll, and finally I spot it at the centre of the bonfire. It is unharmed. Covering my mouth against the drifting stench, I approach the smouldering wood and carefully reach in and pluck the little doll from where it lies. I expect it to be too hot to touch, but it is stone cold in my hand, a cold like death. creeping up my arm. I try to release it, but find my grip has frozen around its body, and a demonic ricochet whispers through my soul, knocking me off guard. Something inside me withdraws like a wounded animal into the darkest recesses of my mental caves, and a new and sinister awareness starts to form. A heavenly, no, hellish connection to an unknown world. The doll, it is controlling me. I feel its energy filling me, and I realise the helplessness the priestess must have felt. I begin to feel empowered, but it's not a power I have ever wished to possess. Suddenly, there is a movement in the broken wood that smoulders on the sand. Some haunted vision injected by the doll, I pray. But then one of the bodies of the girls begins to move, to awaken from its tortured position, and one by one they all stand up where they have fallen, and turn to face me. I stare at them in terrified horror, at their twisted, blackened limbs and sightless faces, joints and knuckles dislocated and forced into new formations, and the thought of them as string puppets reanimates in my mind. Only their master is me. They stare at me with empty, hollow sockets, at the doll in my hand. I try to move, to throw it away. I try to scream, I try to run. I cannot, and the girls begin to sway, slow and rhythmic, a mimicry of their dance the night before. I stand bolted to the spot as they dance within the fire, exactly as they had when it had burned. Their dancing forms a spiral, and as I watch, their spiralling formation brings each of them from the fire pit until they are dancing again on the sand. They snake around me, and I am surrounded by them, enchanted by a tune I cannot sense. I scream for them to stop. I threaten to destroy the doll. I try to pull its head off as the priestess did, but it won't come free. And just as I am about to throw myself to the sand before them to beg for mercy, they stop and stare straight past me at the lapping waves. A feeling of cold tickles my spine, and I turn. Coming towards me from the sea, stepping out of the waves as though returning from a swim, is the priestess. She is headed straight for me. I freeze as she calmly approaches me, the remains of her cloak hanging in shreds from her slender figure, parting just enough for me to see the charred and blackened skin that lies beneath. She approaches me without a word, without a sound, her eyes white and sightless in her head. And slowly she extends her hand towards me, towards the doll. I realise she wants it. I don't want to give it to her. Without any hesitation, as if I had a choice, I hold it out for her, and she takes it from me. My breath catches in my throat as she inspects it, turning it this way and that to assess it for damage. Then she holds it out before her for the dead girls to see. They drop to one knee in subservient genuflection and bow their heads. I watch, and I wonder what role I shall play in whatever happens next. But the priestess' fist tightens furiously around the little doll, and it bursts into flames. The girls' heads snap up and watch as she launches it into the ashes of the fire. The fire pit erupts into flames once more, but this time it is not an enchanting fire. It is a fire of justice for the doll. The girls stand, and we watch together as the little doll burns, and I am sure I hear a deathly tone escape it, like a scream of torment, as its sackcloth body is engulfed. The blaze intensifies, and I step back from the heat, but the girls do not. They are rooted to the spot, watching with the priestess as the furnace licks at them with no effect, and finally, when the doll is no more, the fire blows out, and there is nothing left but ashes and a tiny pall of smoke. I watch a moment, stunned, and then the girls and the priestess turn towards each other. The priestess nods, a single command unspoken, and together they begin to disintegrate where they stand, bones and limbs and muscle falling away, until each of them is nothing more than an ash embossment on the beach, an echo of where they once stood. I stare stunned at where they had been moments before, and then I am forced off the beach as the waves begin to broil, to send white horses of foam leaping over each other towards the shore. I escape to the rocky crag and scramble up the rocks to an elevated position above the bay, watching as the sea rushes in, washing away every last trace of the fire and the priestess and the girls, eradicating all evidence of their nightly ritual, as though they had been nothing but a dream. Perhaps they were. I stare at the empty bay a while, then make my way over the crag and out of the cove, to where a lonely path wends between the hills, the only exit entrance from the hidden beach. As I crest the hill, I stumble upon something lying in the dirt. I stare uncomprehendingly at it. It is the doll, charred and blackened, but in otherwise perfect form. It's impossible. I watched it burn. Its little eyes erode my soul. I feel its cold again, the cold like death that envelops me and creeps beneath my skin. Slave to it, I reach down and pick the doll up. Taking it with me, I make my way around the hill to where the path leads me down to a neighbouring cove, as secret as the last one. On the beach I see a group of girls frolicking. I find a place amongst the rocks and watch them. Their game ends and several of them run towards the sea, stripping their clothes off and discarding them in their wake. My fingers pluck a fresh thorn from a bush and I stab it into the doll as they reach the water's edge. As one, the girls jerk in pain and begin to scream. I look from them to stare into the doll's unseeing, cross-stitched eyes, and I know the awful truth. It is happening again.